live. And the code is up on the screen, WGTCR. And panelists, you can join in as well.
Okay. And the first question is, this post if this post came up on your news feed, would you copy and paste it? And that's the sample of the post that came to your news feed. Okay, A for yes, B for no. Okay. The next one, question 2. What happens when you click on this ad in Instagram? And this is sunglasses. A, you'll get 90% of a hot pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses. B, you would get 90% of your fake pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses. C, your account will be hacked and a cyber criminal will see your information. Okay, now, would you like this image? Now look at this little cute kitty cat. A, yes. B, no way. Now come on, look at those eyes. Come on, right?
I'm not the way.
Okay, right? Number 4, how does this image make you feel? And it's a text, okay? And does it make you feel A, confused? B, feel happy? C, hurt? Or D, just plain angry?
All right, see some live action voting happening?
Yeah, yes. Okay. Now this one, number 5. Can you spot the fake news headline? A, story A, is that the fake news? Or story B, is that the fake news? Which one, A or B? Which one is the fake news headline? Okay. Number 6, would you retweet this? From Miss Taylor Swift updates. A, yes. B, no. Okay. And then our 7th question, would you click the link in this email? It says, Dear Facebook user, we want to update your account. A is for yes, and B is for no. All right. Thank you for your participation. And based on that, and we'll talk about that throughout the panel, based on that, that's why we're here today. And this, for you to know, this will be recorded as well. Let me take this moment to introduce you to our great panel. From my right to my left, Mr. Walter Kerner, who is the Associate VP of Cybersecurity and other things in Cyberland, okay, and security, to help us make sure that we are secure in what we do. Next to him is Dr. Susan Breton, who is the director of the Counseling Center, and she helps people who are dealing with cyber things and other things as well. And then next to her, we have our student representative, who is a member of the Black Student Union and also a President Scholars, Kiara Lachey Williams. And then finally, we have our instructional design librarian of the Gladys Marcus Library, Helen Lane, here with us as well. So give them a big hand. Now, okay, there we go. So I am going to move to the chair because I want to feel intimate with the group, okay? So I'm going to do that, all right? And I guess I'm going to take one of these. All right. And they're going to take one as well. Everyone's comfortable?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. What does being uncivil online mean? Can you provide examples and what forms can it take? And I want to focus this on with Walter and Kiara.
You can go first. It's up to you. Okay. I would say being uncivil online would involve being rude or nasty or intentionally deceiving to someone online. I know that a big platform that is filled with a lot of uncivility is Twitter. A lot of people think it's Instagram, but it's definitely Twitter, because through Twitter there's usually no photo, it's just words, and people commonly justify what they tweet based on its freedom of speech. And also you get like information on your timeline not even from people you follow. It's just if someone you followed retweeted them, now you have it popping up on your screen. So I would say Twitter is a major platform.
I agree with everything you said. I think one thing it's not is disagreeing with people. You can disagree civilly, and that's key to civil societies, is having that disagreement. I think one thing that happens pretty often is that people wind up debating something and they pretty quickly get off the facts and get onto the personal. So I say something and you say to me, only stupid people believe that thing. And my answer would be, well, if only stupid people believe it, it must be pretty easy to rebut it with facts rather than coming after me. So, as an individual, so I think it's about getting away from the facts of the argument and getting onto the personal and kind of hiding behind the distance and the screen to do it.
Oh, that's interesting. That brings me to my next question, and because do you think that, and this is open to the entire panel, do you think that people act differently online than they would face-to-face? And this is open to the whole panel.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is especially encouraged on platforms like Twitter, which are where you can maybe get a lot of likes from a certain crowd for having a pithy comment or having a swift comeback. And it encourages the kind of dialogue that can lead to argument, that can lead to incivility. So yes, absolutely.
I also think that, people often will feel liberty to say things behind a screen that they wouldn't say to your face. And so I wonder sometimes about, as a comeback, one might say, hey, let's have a talk about this face-to-face. And I wonder how much that might in itself shut it down, because I do think that people do hide behind the screen a lot. So the flip side of that, to Walter's point, is that the internet allows for greater platform and freedom of information out there. So we don't want to, limit the internet, but we want to learn how to use the tools of this greater expression in a way that respects other people and takes other people's opinions into account. So when I think about cyber civility, I think about being mindful of my audience and being aware of who might read what I put out there, because it isn't necessarily just about me getting it out there, it's about someone else receiving it.
Yeah, just to follow up on Susan's point, about 2 or 3 times a year, just in my job, I get a nasty email from somebody complaining about, why this cyber safety rule is pointless, or the training isn't good, but it's some pretty nasty emails. And the first time I got one, I was really put off and hurt by it. And now my standard approach is, thank you for your email. Could we get together and talk face-to-face about your feedback? And only once out of about the 10 nasty emails I've gotten has anyone ever taken me up on it. So that tells me something.
And the one thing that we talked about too regarding emails is sometimes when people get angry, they sit there and they write their email and they make a mistake and they send it. So what I tell students and staff, if you write your email if you have to, but don't put the email leave that blank. That way you can come back to it, and when you realize, you say, oh, I'm glad I didn't send that email. So that's one of the things of being
Yes, Ron,
civil.
I agree with you completely. I think we have a lot of reactionary responses,
absolutely.
Right? So you say something in a platform on a blog or something, and someone responds to it because it strikes a nerve. And instead of having a pause and saying, how does this really make me feel? They're like, oh, you jerk,
Right.
like this kind of reactionary, a knee-jerk response, which I do think has a lot to do with poor impulse control.
And also, it's like you said, it's like a barrier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right, Helen? It's like,
Yeah, it's a barrier, and I would also say that kind of impulse control is easier to brush off, even face-to-face. So that if you and I were having a conversation face-to-face, then maybe I sort of something, like I sort of had What do you mean? It could easily be resolved, and instead in an email it has a kind of permanence, and it has a kind of,
Deeper hooks.
yeah,
Like that.
yeah.
I would say also, though, through email, it does give you just a brief moment to kind of like analyze what you're going to say versus if it's on social media, because if there's an argument going on through social media, you're seeing live responses from other people tuning into the argument, and the other person you're arguing with getting likes, and you're like, well, I need to say what I have to say now because people are looking at it now, and I don't want to seem like I'm not going to reply. So that's when you quickly type something mean too. Then you get likes as well, and you're like, okay, then I said something good, but it probably was not nice at all.
Can I just real quick also, because, I mean, I think students, we were talking about students, how they communicate, and students use social media more than emails. You find that to be the case?
Definitely, yeah, that's a true fact. I know since I'm on an executive board, we do a lot of emailing, but for the most part, people are using Instagram and Twitter to communicate more than just text these days. Even if you're out in public, you are more likely to ask someone what their Instagram is before you ask them for their phone number.
Wow. I'm getting old. I want to go to Helen. I want to go to you because one of the questions on the survey was dealing with fake news. And the concern is being able to make the difference between what is fake and what is real. So basically, what is disinformation and what is misinformation? You want to talk about that?
Sure, absolutely. And the term fake news is controversial for a good reason, because it is a double-edged sword, and it also plants seeds of doubt, which in turn promotes uncivility, or incivility. So disinformation, I think, is the right word for it. So disinformation versus misinformation has everything to do with intent. Now that seems like a very simple definition, and maybe it could just end there. What is the intent of the person who has published this? And yet, getting back to the social media argument, news sources, whether they be online newspapers or the online presence of a TV channel like CNN or what have you, or Fox News, they also want likes. So they are very apt to create clickbait, even if they are from a reputable news source. So I guess the advice there would be, or my perspective on that is, if you don't read the article before you send it along on Twitter or repost it on Facebook, you could be spreading disinformation just by how the headline makes people feel. And so it does become trickier than the intent of CNN in the news story. Like, what was their intent in naming the story, that their choice of image, and so forth. So even a very reputable news source can spread ill will and ill feeling by hoping to get clicks and likes.
And this is a very powerful situation because most people do not get their news through newspapers and through TV like the old days. They get it through social media. Anyone else want to add to that?
If I just might, I do think we form our own affinity groups in how we search things and what we look at, and I can tell you that I'm a New York Times person, and NPR, and they're basically the same, PBS, it's all kind of the same, and so they may be all sort of this, what I consider to be the better side of things, but really they're a similar sort of informed side. And so for me to really be informed about politics, I want to make sure I'm also looking periodically at Fox News or understanding something that might be like the Wall Street Journal, something that's a little bit different perspective, so that I can be mindful and understanding of that perspective and respectful of that perspective, so that I can respond in a way that allows me to be civil in an informed and open way. But most people just kind of stick with their own. I don't think Trump is reading, maybe he's reading Politico, I don't know, but I doubt it. And so it's just sort of like, he doesn't want to see that. So that motivates him to stay in a certain frame, and I think we tend to do that. So I don't know, what do you think? Do you think students do that a lot? Stick to their own sort of friends, groups and stuff, or not?
Yeah, regarding like the headline and it like quickly catching people's attention, on Instagram, there'll be a post. It's immediately sent to the group chat. Everyone's like, oh, what's the new news? Especially Shade Room. Shade Room always is posting fancy little taglines, this happened. And if you don't actually read the paragraph, you don't really know what's going on. And I know one time the Shade Room commented on something that was said on Nicki Minaj's Queen Radio. And me and my friends, we actively listened to her radio station. And she literally had just finished the radio show. They immediately made the headline. It was so incorrect. It was so off. And the only reason we knew that is because we had watched it. But anyone else that had seen the Shade Room, Nikki had said something so awful, and we're like, that is just not even what she meant or how she said it. So it definitely has to do with your friend group and who's giving you the information and whether or not you're looking at the other sources.
I want to go back. I want to go to Walter right now. I want to go to Walter right now and ask him basically to tie this together. Like, what are the similarities and differences with cybercrime, cyber incivility, and disinformation? And how are they related in some way?
Yes, it's a really interesting point. I think for whatever reason, online gives credibility. You know, I read it on the internet, so it must be correct. I read it on Wikipedia, so it must be correct. And in all three of the cases of, let's call it, fake news and cyber crime and cyber incivility, somebody is hiding behind the anonymity and the credibility of online. Somehow those two are related, but they're hiding behind that, and they're trying to make you believe something that's not true. They're trying to make you believe that if you click on that link, you'll win $1 million, or they're trying to make you believe that your self-worth shouldn't be what it should be, or they're trying to make you believe that, you know, Nicki Minaj said something that she didn't say, or Donald Trump said something he didn't say, or Hillary Clinton said something she didn't say. It's all that same idea of sort of getting people to a place where they're not looking at it and evaluating it, whatever the content is, critically, to bad results for the consumer. And I really, that's why we do these panels together, is I think they're really all very closely related symptoms of the same issue. You know, to your point, the unwillingness to read the detail. So if you just hook somebody a little bit, then...
Well, and to be like-driven.
Yeah.
Right. And when news is like-driven, I think we're in a lot of trouble, no matter what our favorite news source is. And so we're in a lot of trouble because, well, unless we employ critical thinking and empathy. And I think that those two also go hand in hand. Because if you're a critical thinker about what you're reading and what you're sharing on social media and what you're liking on social media and all of that, it will encourage you to understand others, because you can't be a critical thinker without trying on other people's arguments or points of view. And right there you have a certain amount of empathy, even if you don't have complete understanding.
Helen and I were involved in something last week.
Yeah.
One of my friends, which shows you how trustworthy my friends are, shared on Facebook a story about a celebrity who died. Except somewhere in the back of my head, I remember that person that died, Roger Moore from the James Bond movies, had died like 3 years ago.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked it up on Wikipedia, or I Googled Roger Moore, and one Wikipedia entry said he had just died, and the other one said he died 2 years ago. So Wikipedia was disagreeing with itself, or at least as reported by Google.
As reported by Google. So it takes a while for Google to scrape data from Wikipedia, but what had been updated on Wikipedia was the paragraph about Roger Moore. And what hadn't been updated was the box on the side, which had the actual death date. Now, what was interesting is that you and I were trying to figure out where the misinformation came from. Did it come first from social media, or did it come first from Wikipedia? I'm confident it came first from social media, that for some reason the story had been triggered again in someone's feed and then instantly gone viral again. You know, so some article from the BBC saying Roger Moore is dead suddenly started to go viral again for whatever trigger reason, for whatever algorithm. You'd been looking at a lot of Bond films. Bam, turns up in your feed. Because you could see in Wikipedia exactly when the spike happened, because there's a way that you can look at that, of people going to Roger Moore's webpage, his Wikipedia page, to check if the facts were true. And somebody did a quick anonymous mobile edit changing the death date just that day.
And it was only 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
You put it back.
And then somebody else was like, "You're wrong," and put it back. So,
Do you think that Wikipedia has an obligation to monitor that, monitor the edits of that? Because, I mean, it looks like it can be.
I would like to say that Wikipedia and social media are very, very different.
Yeah.
Wikipedia, I mean, I want you, it is, I'm odd maybe among some librarians for supporting Wikipedia. It is an encyclopedia and it is a community. But that community part is very important. If you can imagine people who dedicate all of their free time to writing articles about various subjects, and they edit and critique each other, and there's open talk on every single article, and there are standards. So that change, that inaccurate mobile anonymous change, was caught by a diehard Wikipedia editor who probably is a Bond expert, right? And changed within 15 minutes to the correct answer. Whereas social media relies on algorithms that are based on trying to market to you. And when those are, when those fall prey to political polarization, to news media agencies trying to get your attention, it's a very different kind of information environment, a very different, like where you're having things fed to you that reaffirm your belief, right? As opposed to editing an article and having another editor say, wrong. It's a different environment.
And just to go back to Ron's earlier point about people getting their news on social media, if you think about journalism, journalists view themselves as having an obligation to get facts right. And even, the news department whether you're left or right wing, the news departments put some work into getting facts right. Social media is about fast. So somebody saw an article and ran over Wikipedia and, from their mobile phone and did an update without really, speed was more important than accuracy. And that changing dynamic is so important.
That's true, and that leads me to my next point, and I think we're talking about it. The thing is, the question is, why do people believe things online more than anything else? I mean, people get news from online, people get facts from online, and we're talking about the whole role of social media, Wikipedia, but our students get their information online, basically. And how do we know what to believe?
I would say a big issue is people simply aren't reading these days. They really are looking at the first few words or reading the first paragraph, and that's the fact, that's the truth. They aren't looking at any other database. They aren't reviewing or doing any sort of research. They read the one article, and as far as they're concerned, it is the truth. I know growing up, I was always told not to use Wikipedia as a source, so I don't know if there's more regulations to Wikipedia these days, but personally as a student, I was always told Wikipedia can be for basic, generic information, but if you really want to go in depth with a topic, go to a database.
Oh, I agree with you on that, yeah.
Where you know that actual researchers did the research. But like you said, it's the instant knowledge. People want to quickly get to the information. They immediately want to say their response. There's no actual evaluation.
Okay.
Where's the deep thought?
It doesn't exist.
I think people want to see affirmation for what they believe anyway. And I think that there's a lot of people who feel voiceless in either validly or in their own estimation, voiceless, and that having that voice on social media is addictive. And getting your views sent back to you as affirmation is also addictive.
But I guess it goes to a whole idea of fact and opinion. And, you can't, you can own your opinions, but you can't own your own facts. But I think that's what we see in social media. We
find community development around false.
Exactly.
Right? Or around truth or whatever. But just this is how I think students are perhaps finding their community now, is with this, as Helen had said so articulately, with these affirmations and feeling like, oh, these are like-minded people, so they must be friends. They're people that understand me and get me, and I think we're all looking for that. But I think it's, it's very important to know what you're joining,
Right, it wasn't a criticism because sometimes it can be very supportive. There can be some wonderful stuff there too, but I think that it also explains some of the disinformation and misinformation sometimes. And I think we need to make a distinction between believing online information and social media information, because what's not online.
I was just going to say on Twitter, I know a lot of people, even me, I do consider Twitter one of my main sources for news, but I do, of course, make sure I review other platforms before I repeat the information. But we give people a platform to feel as though they are important news figures, no matter who they are. They could be the most randomest person tweeting behind their computer, but they have a couple of thousand followers, and now they're a news reporter. As soon as they tweet it, however many followers they have, it's already been retweeted. It's already been carried on and retweeted by the next and retweeted by the next. And now that's the news, and now it's trending. And it could have just been a complete lie, but it's already trending, and more than likely, people are not going to read further into it.
Aren't there some psychological studies about likes essentially giving people dopamine rushes like drugs?
Absolutely. No, we know that for a fact that, and we see this in behavior, even the students here. People will spend money that they don't have to buy likes, so that they can have a platform in which they have more power. So this is for real. This is definitely for real. And I do think, it is like an addiction,
And yesterday at the keynote, I had no struggle with the weaponization of social media. So whether it's people buying likes for dopamine rush, or whether they're buying likes for bad reasons, and there's lots of them, it's a real thing.
Wow. So, right now, so far, we've spoken about information and being literate in the cyber world. But I want to talk a little bit about cybercrime, because I think the more we are aware of what we can do in cyber life, the more we are aware of what preventing ourselves from being part of a victim of crime. So, what steps can we take to protect ourselves from becoming a victim of cybercrime? Walter.
Well, there's lots of very specific things you can do, like turn on your two-factor authentication, Google, that kind of stuff, which I hope everybody here is doing. If you're not, on the CyberSafe website tells you how to do it. But I think a lot of it is engaging critical reasoning. People send you unsolicited emails. Don't assume they're harmless. Don't open stuff from people you don't know when it doesn't make any sense. Why would some store you've never shopped in send you some free offer or a survey about your customer experience when you've never been there?
Right.
Don't download, don't be skeptical of the website that asks you to download something. Don't just download from willy-nilly places. And don't provide information if it doesn't make sense to do that. Be conscious of the fact that people are listening and misusing the information. We show a video at orientation where they set up a laboratory, or it's a real coffee shop in London. They say, like us on Facebook and we'll give you a free cup of coffee. And unbeknownst to the people who like, there's a truck set up outside with a couple of computers, and they do research on the person while they're getting the coffee. And instead of on the side of the coffee cup, instead of saying, latte, it says, Fred, who lives here, whose job is this, whose religion is that. Because they were all able to get it that fast because the like shared the information. So, a little critical thinking and a little healthy skepticism goes a long way in keeping you from being attacked.
I'm an orientation leader, so I watched the video that he's talking about, and I would say the main issue is that people are oversharing. So yes, all you did was like Starbucks' page, but now they have your Facebook, and you've listed where you used to live, your old high school, your mother's name, your cat's name, all the answers to the security questions, more than likely, and just like that, from a like, they have all of your information.
Do you think students know that?
I feel like when we first were introduced to the web, there was a certain like uneasiness about it, but now that there's so many different websites, apps, and all sorts of things, people aren't using the same amount of caution that they used to. Yeah. But I would say if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably because it's not true. Yeah.
Good point. Well, I think the one thing that is common right now, if you're on Facebook and you're logging into another app, they say, would you like to log in through Facebook?
Right.
Oh, just go right ahead. You're just giving everything away by doing that. So you have to be careful when you interconnect your apps or interconnect yourself, because that just makes it easier for people to get your information. And the thing is, your information is power. Because when people have it, they can do whatever they want. They can get your bank account, they can cyberbully, they can do anything you want. It's very powerful. And once they have your information, it's very hard to, to correct it. Am I right?
There was a great story I read about a professor, a computer science, cyber safety kind of professor at a school in the Midwest, and his assignment to his class over one of the breaks was go sit in the food court of a mall and just listen to people's conversations, either on their cell phone or to each other, and based on what you overhear and what you can get on public sources, figure out as much as you can about this person you've never met. And what they were able to do is pretty scary.
People have to be aware of that. You have to be cautious of what you do. I mean, when you go to a coffee shop and use their public Wi-Fi, that just opens you up to anyone. So you have to be careful on that. Susan, I want to talk to you a little bit about, cyber. I want to go to the cyberbullying and incivility, and really, what can students do to make sure they're being civil online?
Well, that's the question of the hour.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk here on this. I guess I feel like, some of what we were talking about in terms of being impulsive and reactionary when you're in the moment in online and you're in it is very human, and I think it's, we have to acknowledge that that's how people are. They want to be liked, they want to respond, they want their opinion heard, they want to have a voice, and they feel like this is a position of power that they're in asserting themselves, which are all good things. But I also think that what we sometimes lose sight of is the responsibility that we have, the social responsibility and the personal responsibility that we have to other people who are online with us. And so I do believe that part of the one way to sort of stop cyberbullying is to be aware, as I said earlier, in when you're about to say, to say, well, who's going to get this? Am I going to feel this in tomorrow morning when I wake up? Is this worth adding to this storm? For whatever rush I might get from being part of it, when I'm going to have to deal with the ramifications of being part of it. And I don't think sometimes students, especially, and I'm going to talk about it in terms of a little bit of developmentally, I don't think students developmentally necessarily have the understanding of the larger context of their footprint online and how long it lasts, and that, as Ron was saying, it's very hard to change things. Your Facebook post that you put is going to be looked at by employers and other kinds of things. And I think students know that maybe, but they forget. They forget when they're at a party and they're, Instaing or Snapchatting something or whatever, that it could be, Anyway, that specifically about cyberbullying. Again, we're in a platform or on a blog, and we're as was discussed, by Walter. You're taking the information that's like, oh, I really like this particular, whatever it is, and then taking it away from the issue and putting it on an individual and attacking the individual, usually it comes from a place of wanting attention. People say mean things like that because they want you to be like, hey. And so if you give them that, hey, okay, then you're kind of feeding it. Yeah. And so I think it's important that you understand that you as a reciprocant, is that a word, of that hate, if you want to call it that, have an opportunity to deal with it in lots of different ways. And one of them is to just stop and think.
Yes, and actually, it's interesting that because when I have been attacked before, and recently, this is very funny actually to me on the side, it was on a forum, a librarians forum, where we were discussing the Oxford comma. Okay.
High stakes.
The discussion went to deeper issues of language and culture, and some feelings ran high. And I figured that some of what I was seeing, though, were people, you don't know what they faced during their day from somebody else, right? Whether or not that's been at work or somewhere else online. And if they don't retaliate, that you may sometimes get the retaliation that was directed at some misplaced retaliation, exactly. And that's another reason to just hold back and look and just say, okay, this is about the Oxford comma.
Being able to take the perspective of the other person, I think, often is helpful whenever we're having a communication breakdown, right? And I think that cyberbullying is a communication breakdown,
yeah.
Right? And if we can look at it as being a way of civilly communicating with each other, I think that's the goal. And so, if someone sends venom to you, and as I was saying before, would you say that to them, face to face? Would you come back with that? And if you wouldn't, then perhaps a pause is necessary and a reframe, and you can actually have more power if you don't just knee-jerk back.
I'd like to take, before we get to our final question, I want to ask the audience a question. And anyone who wants to participate, please do so. Have anyone in the audience been involved in a victim of a cyber crime or a cyber incivility that they want to share?
You've all been tweeted something or texted something that by a boyfriend, by somebody that was incivil, I'm sure. We all have personal experiences of this.
I've gotten into political, arguments. Thank you. I've definitely gotten into political arguments online with people, and what I will say about it is then when I knew I was going to see the person face to face, it made me very anxious. I shut down the argument online. I didn't want to engage in it. I, blocked the person. We're no longer friends online. But then there was an event and I was going to see this person in person. And I had a physical anxiety about it. Right. That's all, just to share.
Yeah. There are many sources on campus that you can get help, and I just wanted to make sure that I get to these. Actually, Ron, go back to that other one. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, we did create some slides for you guys. So we talked about this, if you're thinking through something in a broad way of not just one point of view, but multiple points of view, and then as the keynote speaker the other day said, you want to take the political context that's constantly changing whenever you're looking at the facts. Everything's changing around you, so we have lots of moving parts that make it very difficult to sometimes know what's the truth, what's the right way to respond, okay? But if we can be critical in how we look at what's being, put online and take the perspective of the other person that might be sending this to you, as well as the perspective of the audience that may receive whatever you throw out. That pebble is going to have a ripple effect. Who might be touched by that? Before you hit send or post or, I think that makes a big difference, actually. And then, yes, so, this is I think comes from your office, in terms of really key points to if something is coming at you, you don't have to respond. you know? And I know it feels like it takes away your power not to respond. And I think that's really the difficult part, I think, for students. Like, well, what do I do if I don't respond? They've silenced me, no!
I definitely yes, because since if it's on a social media page, you're like, well, everyone thinks that I'm not strong, everyone's seeing that I'm not replying, and now it feels like I've lost the argument. When in fact, you probably more than likely won it just for being the better and stronger person and not feeding the fuel or diving into that conversation that just a response was unnecessary.
I don't know how to
Very
prove
well
that.
put.
Exactly. Have faith in that, though, I think, is what the message that we were trying to say to students in this. And if something does occur on campus, there are several offices that one can go to get help, including my office and the counseling center, of course. But there's the dean of students who's available to talk about different kinds of issues that might be going on. There's a Title IX coordinator who's actually here specifically for, breaches in some sort of, school policy and the, code of conduct. And then, finally, I think that there's also your office, and, it could be reported to security if it's 24 hours a day. If you feel like you need to tell someone it's 3 in the morning and you're getting this and you don't want to wait until the morning, you talk to security about it, and they'll contact all the other people to get things going. Finally, I'll mention the care team. The care team is a place that if you're feeling like you don't want to confront the person directly, or you can't for whatever reason, and because that would be my first thing, is go up to someone and say, hey, what's going on? But if you don't feel like you can do that, then this is a place in which you can send a report to, it goes to the Dean of Students' office, and someone will kind of check up on what the situation is. So I'll give you all of those as tools that are here for you. But what we're trying to talk about here is stopping it before it gets to that point.
Any questions? Please, let's give a hand to our panelists.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.